Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. In today's video, I just wanted to share my experiences at the Gary Numan and Psychedelic Furs show last night. I had a really good time. I'm obviously a little bit tired still. It was about an hour and a half drive each way. It was in a place called the Parks Casino, and it seats about 1,500 to about 2,000 people. And overall, the venue was really nice. I mean, for a casino, you know, I've been to some casino concerts and they're mostly stand up, and this one was a little odd because it was all sort of like seating, and it kind of felt like a seminar. Like my perfect experience to, you know, as you get older, you can't necessarily sit down for 3 hours, and you don't really want to stand up for 3 hours to see a show. You know, when you see like two bands that have a pretty extensive catalog, it's going to be kind of a long show, and plus there was maybe about a 30 minute break in between the bands too, which is of course when you got up. But our seats were so tight. Like I'm kind of a big guy. I'm about 6'6", 6'7", and my brother's 6'7" too, and then my sister, and we're just like, the seats are so small, and so I was just, you know, I was a little bit like, I don't know, you know, you couldn't even really like move your shoulders. Like it was really kind of stiff. Like they really try to squeeze in a lot of seats into that venue. So that was probably the only thing bad about the whole night, was just the seating was a little bit tight. You know, we got in the show. Gary Numan opened. And again, Gary Numan, you know, he puts on a great show. You know, like he really wants you to have a good show. I really liked his performance. I don't mind that he's kind of a little bit over dramatic and makes it kind of I mean, he's giving a performance. You know, Gary Numan really likes music. I mean, it kind of sounds kind of silly, but like he really enjoys the performance. He really wants to put on a good show. He really enjoys what he does. He looks like, you know, he doesn't seem jaded at all in the smallest. And I guess that's kind of what I mean about Gary Numan being very passionate about his music and just his performance and everything. He just seems like he's really into it. He doesn't there's no time where he looks a little frustrated at anybody, or, you know, maybe the sound is a little off and he's, you know, going like this to turn down the microphone. He just seems really an enjoyable person, and just very friendly, of course, as well. And that this just goes from his disposition and he's just a true gentleman. And so I really enjoyed his performance. The only really drawback maybe about, and it's kind of what I thought, even though I didn't really see any of the set lists before in this particular tour that they're having. I made sure not to see any of the set list in this particular for these two bands, because I wanted to be a little bit surprised on what the music they played. But with Gary Numan, I wasn't really surprised that he played pretty much new stuff there. I mean, from my understanding, there was only two old songs. It was Gary Cars and Our Friends Electric, you know, the Two-Way Army song. So from my understanding, there was only those two tracks. And Gary Numan opened, like on this particular tour, they're sort of changing every other night or every couple nights of who headlines. So when somebody headlines, they get a little bit, couple more songs, and then the other person the opener doesn't really have a encore. And so, you know, Gary Numan, I think he went through about maybe 10 to 12 songs, and it was all pretty much newer stuff. I don't know his newer stuff a lot, except for the album Intruder. So, of course, since Intruder was, from my understanding, was his last album. I didn't double check that, but I still think it's his last album. But he played like 3 or 4 songs from that, but there was a sort of a song or two from pretty much, you know, most of like 2003 to like 2015, 2017. It seemed like there was a track in there from almost probably every album. But they all kind of were brought into a very tight sounding set list, and a lot of the tracks, they all worked really well together. Even sort of an updated sort of Gary Numan beat in that. Even when Cars started, not a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is Cars. Oh, okay, this is Cars." Like, so, you know, they kind of updated the beat a little bit, but I can't quite remember how it started, but it was kind of not as obvious as you know, kind of the classic Cars come in Um, but I liked the way they extended it a little bit on that track. But all the songs are really tight. They went really well together. The only maybe the only really drawback I have of Gary Numan's performance is and it's always going to be one that everybody has when you see a band who has 40, 50 years a catalog. There's some tracks here that you wish you would have played, and if you're gonna play like a lesser known song, it's gonna be like, oh, I wish you would have played this lesser known song on this album, or I wish you would have played that song. So the other thing I thought about Gary Numan's set, maybe the only slight concern or I wouldn't say complaint, was a lot of the songs sound similar. They all sound cool, they all sound tight, but they all sound a little similar. Like, I really wish it had pulled out like a big old track. It might have been not a track that everybody knows, but there's a lot of people that Gary Numan, I would assume, in an American audience that really doesn't know much of his career at all. I don't know how, especially if he's the opener and people are going to see Psychedelic Furs. I would have really liked it if he played like Warriors or Berserker or something like that, like something off those albums, and sort of updated them into the set. It would have been nice if there was just one or two of those. I mean, I get it they did with Cars, and then also Our Friends Electric, that sort of brought him into the newer sound. But 12 songs, two basically recognizable songs to any old or new fan of Gary Numan, or even non-fan would probably know those tracks. But it'd have been nice if there was a couple, at least ones in a couple more in the 80s would have been nice. But overall, I really liked this performance. The sound was really good. Uh, the two guys on the end, I don't know if you guys have seen the show, but the two bald guy, the bass player and the guitar player, they look like they're like extras out of like Dune or something like that, or Prometheus, like the Alien movie. Like, they look like an engineer out of the Alien movies, or sort of like lead singer of Midnight Oil. Somebody joked around and said they look like Voldemort from Harry Potter, so that was a little funny. But they're kind of acting out on stage and sort of playing the role, and I like that they're into it. I think to some people it kind of looked a little cheesy, and I think there was one part where they were sort of like hugging and like kissed each other like on the cheek and stuff, and I don't know if that really like adds to the theme of it, or like the sort of dystopian sort of feel of. It was almost like, for a second there, it was almost like they were putting on like I don't know, some like it was like a movie, like I was watching a movie, and it was just kind of like this apocalyptic, just because of their dress. I mean, they're all kind of in rags and sort of grayish tone, and they all sort of look a little bit, they're so thin. They kind of just look like somebody out of Dune, like the movie, and so you kind of got that feeling. But then they're sort of like hugging, and he sort of like told him something and kissed him. But it wasn't strange to me, but it was kind of like, I don't know what that has to do with the show. But then there was the guitar player was sort of like, I know he was really into the music, but there was times when he was like sort of like pointing at the audience and sort of acting a little weird, and then he would put his guitar down and he would be like this, like, and he was just kind of like doing some weird things on stage, and in a way it was kind of like, it's entertaining to me. Like, I was entertained, and it was like, kind of like part of, I think, them just being into the music and sort of, in their own way, maybe it was maybe a little funny to them, or they were sort of just acting strange just to act strange. I don't really know what it is, but there was definitely some people in the audience that were like, what are these guys doing? Like, why are they pointing at me? And why are they like motioning? Like, there was sometimes where he was like this, like, and it was just like, I don't know why you're doing that. But anyways, it was Gary Newman was still a good show. And then Psychedelic Furs came on, and I really like how they started it out. I mean, just boom, right into Heaven, and then President Gas. President Gas is such a timeless track. It's just, and it's so fitting today, like the lyrics and everything like that. It's just it's one of my favorite post-punk songs of all time. President Gas is just amazing. I love it. The jangle guitar on it, and the way Richard Butler sings on it, just like, love his like really British accent on that track, and of course the lyrics in there with the price of medicine, and it's just so fitting today. It's strange how a song 45 years later just totally works today. I didn't see the track list for Gary Numan up yet on set list, but I'll put that up there when they put that up there as well and edit the video, just so you guys can see the set list. But they jumped right into Heaven, and then President Gas, and I think the fourth track was Love My Way, and then they went into Mr. Jones, and of course they rounded out the show with Until She Comes, Pretty in Pink, Love My Way, and then also Heartbreak Beat. Their four biggest hits. I was a little disappointed that they didn't play like, some of the ones that I felt were like, kind of that second tier classics, psychedelic Furs songs that's not necessarily hits, but they're like beloved by Psychedelic Furs, like Sister of Europe, Imitation of Christ, Here Comes Cowboys, Heartbeat, High Wire Days, I would have loved to hear. Angels Don't Cry, I love that song too. A personal favorite, She Is Mine. There's a lot of other songs in there as well. I'm really happy they played In Your Head from World Outside. I love that song. There was a part on when Richard Butler was singing, and just to rewind a little bit back, I was kind of like giving my brother some room, and so I was just like kind of excuse myself. I was just like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna go into the back and just kind of stand in the back. And when I stand in the back, the security guy was like, "Hey, why aren't you sitting in your seat?" Because they wanted to keep the back kind of. And I was just like, I'm not feeling well. I had some bad food before I came here, and it was a long ride here, and just the seats are too tight. Like I feel like I'm like not even. I've never sat in seats before, and it felt like claustrophobic. It was like worse than an airline. Like I felt more comfortable in coach class on an airplane than these particular seats. They're just very like tight. And so that was, again, that was kind of annoying. So I went to the back and just I was like, I'm just going to go in the back and stand up. And that way I can move around because I know I got an hour and a half drive ahead of me anyways. And so decided to stand up. And then the security guard came around like, why didn't you stand in your seat? And I'm like, well, I just feel a claustrophobic. He's like, well, okay, well, just kind of stand over to the side a little bit. We're trying to keep this very clean. So I stood over the side. And then after a little bit, kind of like into the first couple songs, it was pretty much 99% packed, but there was about 20 seats in this very back corner that were empty, and I was just like, oh, I'm just going to go down there and sit down there and enjoy the show. And so I did, and had a great time, just kind of just having some space and put my jacket up and put my legs out and get some get some space. And so then I enjoyed the show from there on, and Psychedelic Furs were really tight. Richard Butler's voice was great. Bass player was great. The new guitar, I think the one thing to note was the new guitar, or I don't know how long that new guitar player, he obviously looks younger. He looks like he's in his 30s, maybe even early 40s, but he definitely looks a lot younger than the Psychedelic Furs guys. But I really liked his sort of guitar that he kind of adds to the band. Kind of a little bit more atmospheric, really nice tones, really reserved, kind of stays in the sweet spot. Nothing really went over the top. Like, I thought he did a really good job, and he does a really good job fitting into the band. There was only one track, and it was a combination of the only really track that didn't work for me, and it sounded kind of off, was Until She Comes. It's kind of a one-note song. I do really like Until She Comes, but live, I never really noticed that the beat was kind of like a shuffle beat, but it just didn't work live. It was kind of like a downer track, too. It was like in between some big tracks. I don't know if you guys seen the show, but I just felt like Until She Comes, I know it's kind of the more it's a popular song. It's a single. I guess it was the only really, probably the last sort of radio played Psychedelic Furs song that they ever did, but it just doesn't. I don't know if it really works live. That's the first time I've seen Psychedelic Furs or Gary Numan live. So I didn't, I didn't necessarily think that it fit. And then the also thing that was a little funny, but the rest of, on that song, the guitar player, I felt like he didn't really know what to do, but he needed to be part of the band. So he was sort of singing Until She Comes in the background, and then he was sort of playing a little lighter on the guitar. But that didn't really work that well, and then the song didn't really work that well. So that was the only song that I didn't feel feel I was like, this song isn't really, going over really well with the audience or really with the set list. I mean, the energy was just kind of a little down on that track. The rest of the tracks, big sound, everything went great. The only maybe slight thing that I didn't necessarily prefer was in Heartbreak Beat, they were playing the tempo a little bit slower, and there was also a point in the bridge or in the second verse, where everything kind of came down and it was just kind of like the beat and him doing the verse, which was kind of cool in some ways, but because the tempo was slower, it just didn't feel like it had the energy of that song. And I'm not a huge fan of Heartbreak Beat, but it is a great song, and it is a very poppy song, and it's, gets the crowd into it. So to be a little bit lower on the tempo and do that track, it didn't really have the impact that I think that they wanted to. Then they came out for the Encore and did India, and that had the impact, even though that's not a well-known song because the tempo was a little bit higher on that track, and it's a higher tempo song anyways, but that went over great, and it was nice to hear that song, but a little strange that there was only one Encore song. I thought for sure they would do High Wire Days or Here Comes Cowboys or Angels Don't Cry, along with maybe another track like that. I really had no expectations on what they were going to do in general, but I had a feeling they would play a lot of the secondary hits. And Imitation of Christ, would have been a nice track. Sister of Europe is kind of a classic track of their early career. But it is nice that they went and did India, which is their first track on their first album. So in a way, that was kind of cool. At the end of the night, I got a chance to head over to the Gary Numan booth and also the Psychedelic Furs booth, and really wanted to get a Psychedelic Furs shirt, but didn't necessarily like the shirts that they were offering. So I went over to the Gary Numan booth and picked up this record. Looks like there's 1,980 of these made. These, and there's some that are signed by him, so I got the one that was signed to him for an extra $10. Totally worth that. But really cool to get something at the show. It's always cool that, and especially these days, that they're offering, copies of records and really cool merchandise. I mean, they have some buttons there, stickers, and it's not just T-shirts and things like that. There's so many things that I think they had like a backstage pass that was signed by Gary Numan, and I'm not sure why you would want to buy a backstage pass if you didn't go backstage, but. But there's some different unique stuff to buy, bumper stickers, and other things. I think there was a drumstick as well. So there's some cool things that they offer that was not necessarily way outside of the range of normal stuff, but it's nice that they have a good variety of stuff. I'm sure they make so much money on merchandise through a tour that it's definitely worth it, and it helps out with being able to tour and the costs that are. The costs that are involved with touring. So nice to pick up this record, and I'll add it to my Gary Numan collection. But yeah, it's my overall thoughts of the Psychedelic Furs and the Gary Numan, my experience at the show. I really enjoyed myself, really liked the Psychedelic Furs. That was definitely two artists that were on my bucket list to check out, so I can say I've seen Psychedelic Furs live, I've seen Gary Numan live, and that's kind of something I've never got around to do, but I'm happy I did. And, if they're out in your area in the next couple weeks and they come around, it seems like Psychedelic Furs comes around a lot. And it seems like almost every year, but it's really special to see Gary Numan in that kind of stage. And that's what's great about when artists kind of get together and do a tour. One may not be as big to draw like 2,000 people, 5,000 people at some of these venues, but when you put two strong ones together, that you can do it. If you've ever seen Gary Numan or Psychedelic Furs, I would love to hear your story. If you'd like to put them in the notes section, or if you saw them on this tour, I'd be interested to hear about it and what you liked and possibly what could have been a little bit better. Just be nice to hear your experiences as well. Thanks a lot for your time, and we'll see you on the next video.